My name is Clara Towson, and I'm a friend of the show.
Boom.
I am Francisca George, and I'm a friend of the show.
Perfect.
Hi, my name is Susan Leemans and I'm a friend of the show.
Boom. Yeah.
My name is Zainab Sammaz and I'm a friend of the show.
Boom.
Hey guys, my name is Sasha Vickery and I'm a friend of the show.
Boom.
Hi, my name is Lloyd Harris and I'm a friend of the show.
Perfect.
Hi, my name is Jan Faria and I'm a friend of the show.
Boom.
Yes.
Take one. Well done.
Hi, my name is Jasmine Paulini and I'm a friend of the show.
Wow, Jasmine, you got it in one time.
Ready? Play.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Talking Tennis. My name is Jack. I'm joined by the wonderful Vansh Ramani. Vansh, how you doing?
Doing well, Jack. It's been a long time. We've done one of these, and yeah, it's always great to talk to you about tournaments that have happened. And yeah, excited about this ATP Weekly.
Yeah, I'm very excited as well. We're getting stuck into the Monte Carlo Masters. Carlos Alcaraz picking up the Masters title this week, beating Lorenzo Musetti in the final. Plenty of other wee stories along the way. A lot of quarterfinalists we're going to get stuck into. Maybe talk about Novak at some point as well, Vansh. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about the following week to come as well. I think the best place to start is right at the end. Maybe talk a little bit about Alcaraz's run this week. Maybe talk a little bit about Musetti's, what it means for either of them. Yeah, I think maybe we start with the final. Ash, did you get to see any of the final? What were your thoughts, feelings, any surprises?
Yeah, I mean the final was pushed back about a couple of hours due to the rain. So I did catch still, I would say the last 50% of it, but I kind of caught up on what happened before. And yeah, I mean coming in there was a storyline of Musetti battling through all those three setters, coming back from getting breadsticked in like 3 of those 4 matches, and just his grit and resolve, and just how much he's improved as a player. Kind of, he's always had the pedigree, but really he pushed forward with those impressive wins this week over Tsitsipas and Diminor, and almost went out of the tournament early. But then you're kind of wondering how much does he have left in the tank against Alcaraz, who got to the final. I must say, not always playing his best tennis, but this was a really important reset for him. Obviously, having lost second round in Miami, there were some questions coming in, like, okay, the clay court season that he missed most of last season. It's a good opportunity for him to push that reset, pick up some of these points, get back to world number 2, and I think over the time we saw him sort of express some of his best tennis in the big moments, but it wasn't always easy. The match against Arthur Fils was probably the turning point in the quarterfinals, where he's a few points away from defeat, and that's just seeing that matchup of 2 really young explosive players, that was quite a treat of maybe what's to come the next 10 years. But then talking about the final itself, I think Alcaraz he came out with a really good start. He served with an early break. He had like 4 game points to go up 2-love, but then Lorenzo, I thought, played quite steady. He was using the deep return position. He has really good power on that backhand wing when he stretched out. He was just making Alcaraz play a lot of balls, and Alcaraz was pulling the trigger a little bit too early. At times, his forehand was a little inconsistent in the first set. He was spraying quite a ton. So actually, Musetti just remained steady and just solid, and allowed Alcaraz to self-destruct a little bit. And he kind of lost his way, Alcaraz, in that first set. But once he sort of clicked back into gear, it was kind of all on his racket at the start of the second, and he made a big adjustment of the return position, moving in about 7 or 8 feet, and taking Lorenzo Musetti's, even some of his first serves, right back at him. So it was very quickly, and that's what you kind of want to do against Lorenzo, because you want to take advantage of his deep court position. You want to be able to rush him so he can't quite play the kind of creative tennis that he wants to. Especially, he has a good forehand drop shot of his own, and you've seen Musetti use the slice and just kind of stay in rallies with his speed. So once that shift kind of took place, then it was about, okay, can Musetti get the momentum back? Is he physically going to be able to last? And the answer was, at the end of the second set, no, because Musetti, unfortunately, all that wear and tear, all that physical toll of all of his efforts across the whole week, it just caught up to him at the end. And I think at points in the third set he couldn't even walk. So it was pretty bad. Like it was unfortunate, pretty sad to see. Alcaraz just took advantage of it and just kind of rode it home. But in the end, it's still a really hard-earned title for him. And obviously the match against Fils ends up being critical, and it just puts him back at number 2 in the world, number 1 in the race. A lot of momentum now for the clay court season. And yeah, I think big picture it was still just a positive week overall.
Yeah, it was huge for both players. I think Alcaraz, could have done with kind of grabbing some of that momentum back. And actually, you kind of suggested it there. He maybe didn't play the best he could play all week, and sometimes those are the titles you need to gain a little bit of confidence. He kind of knows that he can play his B game and beat a lot of these guys. I think the whole week it felt like the forehand was kind of a bit up and down, and then he'd kind of grab control of the match with that same weapon. So, sometimes when Alcaraz's rally temperament comes into question and he loses a match because of it, there's alarm bells and people are like, oh my God, this guy just like sprays it all the time. And, he's got too many choices and all this. And it's good to see him then kind of trust that weapon and really use that to, it's Alcaraz. This is a lot of people me seeing that he's trusting his forehand and using that to beat a lot of these people. But honestly, when Alcaraz has been at his lowest confidence-wise, that is the shot that tends to go. And he did a really good job of using it as a proper weapon this week. So I think it will give him loads of confidence going forward. I think when Alcaraz kind of first came in the scene, I'm sure we talked to Ange about maybe what the ideal conditions were for Alcaraz, and kind of talked about Madrid being the most likely, kind of faster clay, something that's going to be quite higher bouncing and quick. And actually, he's fully capable of playing a really, really, I would say his highest level on slow clay as well. He just kind of needs to figure out how to navigate it, be creative at the right times. And I think even though it was a bit of a bumpy road here, it shows you why he's won the French Open and stuff. And it bodes really well for his Roland Garros chances. I'd say that much. I think my segue after that Alcaraz spiel would probably go into the Alcaraz-Fils match specifically and how close that was, and probably the match of the week. I don't know if you'd agree, Vanch.
I agree. Yeah, definitely. In terms of storylines, even quality of tennis, I felt like was pretty good, pretty high, and yeah, for sure that's the match people are going to be looking at when they look at his clay court season at the end. If it ends up being a turning point, certainly was a turning point this week. So.
Yeah, 3 break points down, 5-all, second set. I'm sure ATP posted that as clutch, and yeah, it's clutch. But it's interesting to hear Alcaraz talk about Fils after the match and kind of suggest that Fils did have those chances, and actually maybe he didn't step up. And after he kind of snuck through that game, it was Alcaraz's to kind of take hold of. So maybe in a way, Fils not quite ready to make that next step, and certainly potential there, but if he cleans up a few things, trusts his weaponry in the biggest points, then it could have went a different way, but he's maybe not quite ready to make that next step, Vance. I don't know if you'd agree with that.
Yeah, it's been consistent performances now from him in the 1000s. 3 quarterfinals in a row. He's the only one on tour that's done that, so that's a positive in the right direction. Certainly as far as he's concerned, like he's knocking on the door of like borderline top 10, maybe a Turin contender if he keeps up this level of play. And yeah, this will be a great learning experience for him because he wins that first set and he's like the more explosive player. Like, his forehand is the heaviest and fastest on the tour in terms of speed and pace. And he was rocking Alcaraz quite a bit, be taking second serve returns super early, like just stepping in and, blasting forehands. And Carlos was struggling because he was trying to absorb a lot of the Fis's power, and he was on the back foot quite often. And then when he had forehands to take advantage, it was tough for him to kind of find that rhythm. I think as the match went on, but in the second set, 5-all love 40. You're thinking probably, okay, Alcaraz is in huge trouble. May 15%, 10% chance he gets out of this game, and and actually that's where I give Alcaraz a lot of credit because he went into this lockdown mode and he forced Fils to overhit in those exchanges. And particularly if you go back and you watch the 30-40 point, there's like 5 massive inside-out forehands that Alcaraz just like absorbs and manages to find Fis's backhand. And like finally Fils just misses this inside-out forehand by like this much. Otherwise, he's probably serving for this match at 6-5. And so for Alcaraz to, he didn't get to break point like pretty much the whole set. And then finally at set point down, he comes up with this miraculous defensive drop shot plus lob combination. And he gets through that set, but then he's down 3-1 in the third, and you're thinking, all right, like Fils, he's come back from these situations, before. Like he won that 3-setter against Zverev in Miami. He's won, he won his 500s last year, all in this kind of a fashion, like just 3-set wins against some pretty good players. So, but at 3-1, I did kind of feel like mentally, Fis's level went down a little bit. Like mentally, he just kind of lost that that same level of focus. And I think physically he was probably feeling it a little bit as well because of the way Alcaraz was able to turn points around defensively at the end, and played kind of a poor game at 3-4 to get broken back. Including, he also had some many highlights. Like his steal score was very high in the third set. Defensively, he was having to do a lot of work. But by this point, Carlos has really found his range, and he had all the momentum going in. And I still felt like he had this look in his eye that I'm not going to lose this match, even though he went down 3-1. So it was kind of a little bit of both happening all at once. Like mentally, he did fail a little bit towards the end, but I still feel like Fils, on a slow clay court, he's going to be a big nightmare. And he hasn't made a deep run at Roland Garros yet, but he's already made a second week at Wimbledon. He's won a fast 500 title. He's won Hamburg before, and so I feel like he's it's good to see this kind of consistency, because last year he was kind of very hot and cold. Like he was either really hot, having really good weeks, or he was losing first round. And now I think we're starting to see something more in between, which kind of resembles a more steadier rise.
Yeah. I think certainly that match maybe took its toll on Alcaraz in a way as well. It's kind of, as he suggested, he was able to maintain this belief throughout the whole match, and I imagine that was exhausting. And maybe it spilled over a little bit into the semi-final. Obviously up 5-2 against Davidovich Fokina, and things went a bit awry. The wheels maybe came off a bit. Obviously did really well to then win that set and close out the match. I think could maybe talk a bit about that match, but also ADF in general. It's been a pretty good season for ADF with some obvious near misses, stuff he would have liked to have got over the line in. It feels like he's knocking on the door. Maybe potential for him to make a deep run at the French Open if he gets the right draw. I don't know. It does feel like something's going to happen with ADF at some point. Maybe it goes the other way though, Vanch, and he gets really close just one too many times, and then the wheels kind of come off for him, and he never makes a deep run in a big tournament again. I don't know. I feel for the guy. I love him. He's like one of my favourite players to watch. I really want him to do well, but it just feels like he's always there or thereabouts. What do you think?
I know. I've always found him like probably the most talented player outside the top 25. Like every single time I go through these clay court tournaments, even some big hardcore tournaments, I'm like, yeah, ADF. I mean, he has all the tools. Obviously, the serve is a bit of a lightweight, like in terms of the very elite players, and that kind of holds him back. And then obviously the shot selection we talk about quite often. Being able to just kind of make the decisions, and based on the incoming ball, what to kind of do next, when to pull the trigger. That's where he's a little bit suspect. But in terms of like shot making and talent, ability, and touch and power, like he's up there with the very, very best clay quarters. And the lack of elite spot serving on the serve doesn't affect him as much on clay. And he's kind of he's in it with a shot, and he's like 8th in the race now. So it's been a good year. 4th round of the Australian Open. Like he loses that close Delray Beach final. I thought that would set him back quite a lot, and then he ends up making the Acapulco final right away. Doesn't win either of those two titles, but still like Monte Carlo, he's done consistently well in his career. He's made a final and a quarterfinal, and now another semi. So I think he really likes these conditions, and I was impressed that actually he kept it as close as he did in the second set against Carlos, because that was maybe the best set Carlos played all tournament. His forehand shot quality in that set was like a 9.5, and in overall it was a pretty clean set for him. And ADF still saved 4 match points, made Alcaraz serve it out. So yeah, like this bodes well. Like, and Roland Garros, he's made a quarterfinal before, so I'm kind of thinking like he can kind of do that again. Like he's definitely a higher caliber of player, on surfaces like this, I think. So.
I definitely think, given the form of a lot of other top tenors and maybe their lack of pedigree for clay, you would fancy ADF as one of the kind of dark horses of the tournament for sure.
But now he's back inside the top 30 as well, so he will be seeded, and he doesn't have to play a top player like early in the tournament, hopefully.
Yeah. Stefan Djokovic watching the Alcaraz and Davidovich Fokina match. I wasn't aware of that. That's very funny. Is that a segue? Is that a hint at a segue? We could talk about Novak very quickly. We have talked a lot about Alcaraz's side of the draw. Is there anything else you wanted to add, maybe, Vance, before we move on from Alcaraz? We've talked about him quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, he had the tough first round against Cerundolo, where everybody kind of looked at that draw and they were like, well, yeah, that's about as tough as a draw you could get. And he lost the first set there, but again, he kind of just makes that adjustment with the return position. He ends up finding his game and then kind of just eases through that. And really, I think it was really all about the Fils match. Once Alcaraz got through that, I think he felt pretty confident that no matter who he was going to play in the final, with the players left, he still felt like he could win even without his best tennis ultimately. So
100%. I think it freed him up a bit, actually, for better or worse. I mean, he certainly looked like he enjoyed himself out there and was just able to go for it, and it paid off for sure. I think we could talk about Novak very quickly. Obviously, I lost to Tabio again. Pretty much. He admittedly said after the match it was one of the worst matches he'd ever played. Is it really like Novak to be dramatic? He can be, to be fair. I don't know for sure. I would totally agree with this statement, but it certainly was a clean performance. Is it alarm bells? People like to say that after any Novak loss, really, especially in the early rounds. He very rarely loses the first round. Remember, though, Vesely in Monte Carlo has beaten him in first rounds, in his pomp, Novak. So Monte Carlo's never been that kind to him. He always comes into the clay swing and he's a little bit, rough and ready. Basically, he doesn't quite find his footing immediately. Sometimes it goes on for a while. Generally, finds his form before Roland Garros, and he's admittedly said that's the only thing he cares about this clay season. It feels not like alarm bells for me. I don't even think I'm being optimistic. I am really Team Novak, even though Andy's in that camp. But whatever. I like to see him do well, but I'm not that bothered. So I'm seeing it fairly unbiasedly. I don't think it's alarm bells, Vanch. What do you think?
Yeah, I think coming into most of the Monte Carlo, like once you've seen his record the last 7 or 8 years, you can expect an odd performance like that in an early round and at the start of the clay season. But I think this time expectations were a little higher only because of Miami, right? Like he comes in there, makes the final, and you're thinking, okay, maybe he's finding his form a bit earlier this time, and with the Monte Carlo final. But I think there might have been some residue. I don't know, maybe from the eye stuff. We'll never know. Like he won't really go into detail about it and probably won't mention it. But he said he had some kind of a virus before the tournament. He said also after the match that he wasn't expecting to play well, and he was expecting a bad level, but he wasn't expecting a level that bad. Those were kind of his exact words. And it's weird because the Tabilo match last year was the one where after he got hit by a water bottle, and it was kind of just like kind of semi disinterested, borderline tanking Djokovic performance. And then this one it was odd because you started out with a break, and you're thinking, okay, like this is going to be different than Rome, and then all of a sudden he just couldn't find the court with his forehand, like basically the whole match, and he never really got going motivationally wise either. So it was a bit of a puzzling one, but at the same time, it gives him like 2 weeks to be ready for Madrid and Rome, and I just feel like the focus is all on Roland Garros. So I think I can properly judge Novak better after Madrid than this one.
And it kind of feels like we've said this in previous years as well, right? So it's really just not. Yeah. I don't think it's that much of a concern at all. And I'd give him a bit of time. The guy is so good on clay when he gets going, and it's also historically been the forehand. I would have said that is the shot that takes a while to get going and to really find that power, that easy power that maybe he doesn't have to kind of force on other surfaces. I think it does take a little bit of adjustment and changing how he plays to get to that stage, and I'm not too worried for him, I would say.
It was also a very cold day where he just wasn't able to, his shots weren't really penetrating.
Yeah.
And I feel like maybe in Madrid, with the serve as well, it'll help him out. He'll probably, he has days off as well. Like it's just a better rhythm probably for him.
Yeah.
Overall. And like
also if you've got
we'll see after that. But it's also not as important in terms of his Roland Garros like prep either because of the conditions.
Yeah, exactly. That's a very good point as well. Hopefully any Novak fans, Pavi, if you're listening, don't be too worried. I think you'll be okay. He should bounce back for Madrid probably, if not Rome, and then I'm sure he normally has a pretty good Rome. So I think so long as he doesn't have a total crash in that tournament, his Roland Garros chances pretty likely, I would say, to do well. I think move on to some of the other quarter-finalists, Vance. We've not really looked that much at the other side of the draw. I'd like to go there maybe for a wee bit, talk a little bit about Musetti de Minaur in the semi-final, talk a little bit about the bizarre result between de Minaur Dimitrov maybe, Musetti Tsitsipas as well. Let's talk about the quarters first. I would like to talk about the quite bizarre double bagel, de Minaur Dimitrov, and then we can talk a bit more about de Minaur as well. I think my first take on it is just, obviously, if you've got a double bagel on the men's tour, something is probably pretty awry. I think probably a lot to do with just the amount of legs Dimitrov had put into his last few matches, I guess. Maybe just ran out of energy a bit. It didn't look like he was really at full pelt when I watched him. He seemed a bit off balance sometimes. And then if you're kind of feeling like that and the court sort of slows Monte Carlo, then de Minaur's probably like your least favourite player to play, right? So I don't know, what's your take on it?
Yeah, I think if you're just that off, if you're having that off of a day, like de Minaur is the worst possible player for you to play because he's just absolutely ruthless and he's just, he's gonna not miss and you're gonna have to hit through him on a slow clay court on top of just filling out. Like I don't know what was wrong because I haven't really heard anything. I'm kind of hoping we will, in a way. I'm kind of hoping slightly for his sake that he was hurt or something, because like 48 points to 15 is like something I've never seen before. Like it was 44 minutes and not a single game went to deuce, and it was like one winner to 23 unforced errors, and it's just like really rough. Like I mean,
when you put it, I think for the tennis layman, obviously not going to deuce means you've not won more than 2 points in a single game. Like that's insane.
It was crazy, and I don't know. Like it's not like he took a medical timeout in between, or like he called the trainer or anything like that. So I don't know. Maybe there's just something we don't know yet that will get revealed later, or not. Like David Goffin once beat Thomas Berdych 6-0, 6-0 in Rome.
That's the one. That's the one that came to mind. That's the last double title I can remember on the ATP tour. I don't know if there has been one.
And then after that, they played again. Berdych won. So it's like, I don't know. I mean, it's sometimes you just have a really bad day, and you're probably just thinking about the prospect of getting double bageled. But yeah, it is still just very strange. I can't put my finger on what exactly was wrong because nobody really knows.
I think a lot of the time, tennis fans will make a bigger deal of these scores than the players. So obviously, Dimitrov will go into his next match with de Minaur, and he won't be thinking, I might get double bageled again here. I'm sure he'll assess his chances very logically and, fancy his chances of beating him if it's a fairly decent surface for him. I just don't, it must be an off match. I don't think it's that big a deal for him. It's still bizarre, but I don't think it's that big a deal. I think, not much more to say there really. We can talk a little bit about the de Minaur Musetti match. Also de Minaur on clay in general, kind of been talking about that. He's worked it out a bit more with his coaching team. Obviously the first signs that I remember of thinking, de Minaur even has got a really good chance on this surface was when he played Alcaraz in that Barcelona quarter-final. The performance there was insane. It was an amazing level, and obviously came insanely close to winning it. I think he was 2 match points up before 15 on serve. And there was this just insane forehand that Alcaraz hit basically behind him to get one of the match points. So amazing performance from Alcaraz to win it. Really, really pushed Alcaraz to get the win. It's been pretty clear, I think, with the kind of consistency you can get on the surface. And actually, de Minaur can get a bit of power behind his groundies, particularly his forehands. I think it makes sense for him to be good on this surface. I was always surprised, really, that he hadn't been as good, and it might just be growing up in Australia and you don't play on it as much, and maybe it's taken a bit of practice to get to that stage. What's your thoughts on it, Vance? Have you heard anything from de Minaur or what the secret might be from getting good on this surface?
Yeah, I think he's just gotten comfortable with like the patterns a lot more of like knowing when to like hug the baseline and take the balls really early and use his skill set, which is like, what he normally does is he takes the ball really early on the rise. He's a great mover. And then I think as the years gone on, he's gotten more comfortable sliding. That's probably one of the things. But also he grew up on clay for a while in Spain. So it's not like he has like no clay court experience. It was more, I think, just his general belief now as a tactician is like improved. Like I saw so many times where he was standing way back with a deep return position and actually like looping a lot of backhands back into play with a little bit more spin, and just kind of like, like when he played Musetti, I mean, it helped that the conditions were a little bit, cold and cloudy. So it was like, it wasn't going to get too high up on his shoulder, the heavy topspin, because obviously he's a kind of a baseline hugger. He hits pretty flat, but he was able to get the ball on Musetti so quick that he was actually rushing Musetti on a slow clay court, which like, you wouldn't have expected 2 or 3 years ago. But he's definitely added a lot more natural firepower. Like there's no way. Like he hits a bigger ball now on the forehand across all surfaces than I've seen him. Like in general, his ceiling has just increased from like a kind of 12 through 20 ranked player to a 5 through 8 guy now. So that's been like super impressive, and it's translated across everything because he made 4 major quarterfinals in a row, and he made the quarterfinals of Monte Carlo last year. And when he was here to play Dimitrov, that didn't surprise me. And then against Musetti, he came so close, so he could have easily been in the final, and he could have given Alcaraz a stern test in the final for sure too. So yeah, I mean, I think he can still keep this up, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him in a Roland Garros quarterfinal. Obviously, like there are still certain limitations. Like the very, very best players will probably will just find a way through him. Like Yannick Sinner, Djokovic when he's peaking, and Carlos. I don't think he quite has enough against those guys.
Yeah.
Maybe he's Zverev as well when he finds his form, but like he's still just outside of all those players, he's got to be like the best right now of that grew up in the 90s actually right now, like in this very state that the ATP is in.
Yeah, I think that's a really good assessment of Ivanch. I kind of feel he's maybe on par with kind of Fritz, that kind of level. It feels like he'll beat pretty much all the guys below him at the moment, not really the guys above him. Whether in ranking, I do just mean Sinner, Alcaraz, Zverev, Novak. It's exciting to see what else he can do with it, and if there is another step to his game. I think about quarterfinals for the French Open though as well. Maybe not any more than that, but we'll see. Musetti obviously extremely exciting, and it is really cool to see him make that run. He kind of got over the Tsitsipas hump as well. He definitely had a losing record, but it can't have been that. You'll know, Vance, what was the head-to-head between?
Yeah, it was 5-0, but the thing is they hadn't played since 2023 Barcelona, so it had been a while.
Right. Okay. So a lot.
One of those matches. I mean, Barcelona was 3 sets. I think Roland Garros, there was one 2022. He had to come back from 2 sets to love down, so it's not like a comfortable matchup for Steph. Like even though he leads the head-to-head.
Yeah, and I suppose Musetti obviously showed that with what was exactly the same score. No, it wasn't quite the same scoreline.
Tsitsipas was dominating in the beginning. Like he won the first set 6-1. And his forehand and serve was just doing so much damage, and Musetti, Musetti didn't really find his best game in the first set at all. But Tsitsipas wasn't allowing it, and then I felt like actually Tsitsipas should have broken in the start of the second, and he had won all love 40, and he didn't get that break, and he missed his level dipped certainly in that moment, and that allowed Musetti I think to find the resurgence because the crowd was certainly with him like all week, and like he was. Even against Alcaraz, he had a lot of the crowd, and in most of his matches, and he kind of just rode that wave. And I felt like also, just the backhand to backhand was tough for Steph to contend in those longer points. And there were many occasions where actually Steph, I have a few questions about his serve because he's not been serving well, since the start of Miami, and he had a shoulder issue against Korda, and I wonder if that affected some of his preparation here because he was not great against Thompson. And then Nuno Borges was extremely tired and that was not a test at all. But then against Lorenzo, he's serving like sometimes 2-3 doubles in a game. And that's very unusual for Tsitsipas. He can usually rely on his serve and first forehand. And he was making quite a lot of errors with that. So I think that certainly helped Musetti have a little bit of a lift. But Musetti played really well himself in the last 2 sets.
I think it's very telling of Steph's level at the moment. His confidence, the kind of big weapons of his, particularly, arguably,
it's a big blow for him as well because he's gonna lose 800 points because of this, and I think he's like outside the top 15 for the first time since October 2018. So it's been a really long time since he's been
and that shows you the consistency and how much you can rely on big serve, big forehand. I mean, Monte Carlo is his happy hunting ground. The fact that he kind of lost here, kind of not of his own accord, but certainly, he lost the confidence and weapons that normally work. Steph's just in a bizarre place, and I get it. He's kind of clutching to try and figure out how to find that spark, and it'll be a really telling clay season for him to see if he can do something. Obviously, I still think he's totally capable of a deep run in the French Open. The guy's just a little bit too good. with those as
Yeah.
first kind of punch tennis on this surface, and just making people feel like they've got no ability to find his backhand. He does have a chance, but the confidence is just wavering so much. He could easily be going out in the second round if he makes a deep run as well, though.
He's still searching for that stability in his camp as well, because he's had, he got rid of Apostolos as formally as his coach, but then this week he was back in the box, and full on just conversations in between matches between them, and it wasn't a great vibe. And I think it was announced that he's going to be with Ivanisevic after Roland Garros, so I guess for the grass season. But until then, I think it's like some kind of a dual partnership between him and the Davis Cup captain and someone else that he knows really well. Like, it doesn't feel like it feels like he's still searching at the moment. And
I agree.
Also the serve is the foundation of his game, and if that's not really clicking, then it's going to be tough for him to get to those quarterfinals.
Yeah,
so it's an important time coming up for him.
I think so Ghosty's questioning me in the chat. I get it. I'm not saying it's even a sure thing. Of course, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that Steph has that potential, and if he can re-find it during a time that's generally pretty favourable for him, then why not?
This kind of a match against Musetti, like, he usually wins matches like this. Like this,
Yeah.
This for him in the clay season, that's where you can count on him to win matches like that. As great as Musetti did play, I still felt like it was mostly also Steph whose level dropped quite a bit.
Yeah, agreed. It's pretty worrying stuff for Steph fans, but hopefully he can rekindle something for the French Open, just throw another name into the hat. Speaking of names in the hat, would you rate Zverev's chances? What did you make of the match at the start of the week? My first initial thoughts, it's quite ironic to see that kind of chase. Maybe it's not ironic to see that kind of chase for number one potentially affecting Zverev, and it's not been such a great run since that kind of became a potential. Since that was presented to him as a like opportunity on the table. Do you think I'm reading into it too much? Do you think maybe?
No, I think actually you're not, because he's talked about it so many times himself. Like actually this opportunity for him more than Alcaraz, it's a really big thing. Like, because if you get to number one, that's like a thing you'll always have forever. And like for him, he might never have a better window than this.
Yeah.
So like for him, it's like clearly on his mind, and he was talking in Miami about how he shouldn't have played in February. He shouldn't have played the Golden Swing, and instead he was just chasing this. He felt this opportunity, but you can see it in the big moments because he's really tightening up. Like, he's been up a break in these final sets, like most of these tournaments now, and he's just not closing the deal because he's not going after his shots. He's kind of waiting for the opponent to miss, and that's what happened against Berrettini. Like, they have this exchange at the end at 5-all 48-point rally. But then it was Berrettini who went for the backhand down the line, and Zverev was just ultra passive, just waiting for errors. And he's not going to get them against guys like Fils and Berrettini and even Cerundolo and the Golden Swing. And it's just, and for him, it's kind of the same thing.
Like, to be honest, there's not many players that if they're feeling it and it's like 5-all in a third set and it's been really, really close, that actually are going to miss in those moments. Do you know what I mean? If it's been that tight the whole time, then playing passive isn't really the thing that's going to push you over the line. Zverev a lot of the time, gets these guys because the performance just isn't good throughout the whole match. But if somebody's like toe for toe with him for the entirety of the match and it gets to a kind of tight moment at the end, pretty much all of these guys will go 48 shots with him. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's up to him to come up with something different.
Yeah, and when he's so back and when he's so far behind the baseline and playing this passively, just opens up so many options for guys like Berrettini and Cerundolo and Fils, because they have the touch as well. They can use angles. They can even his first serve can be attacked. There's a lot he ends up looking more one-dimensional when he plays against these kind of players, when he's just in that passive mode. And it's just a confidence thing, because like he just doesn't go after the forehand in those moments, and that's where he gets. Yeah, like that's I think his record is like 6-6 since the Australian Open final, so it has not been good at all.
Yeah.
And like he's like he would probably badly need a good result in Munich and Madrid and tournaments that he's won before, but
Munich you'd fancy him. I can't imagine his record, his win to loss record there will be that shabby, surely.
Yeah, I can't imagine that in the next 4 tournaments, he will consistently keep losing and not win a single match or something like. But at the same time, to expect him to win a big title as well is hard to imagine too. So probably something in between.
Something in between, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll be interested to see how that one pans out. I feel like it's a pretty interesting story to see if he does kind of get over the line there. And then I mean, the only other person I kind of wanted to mention this week, although I don't know if it's a surprise to anybody now, is Medvedev, and just that kind of ongoingness of kind of shabby play from him, really feeling like he's not quite where he wants to be. He had some really scrappy matches for his first 2 matches of the tournament, no surprise there, and then de Minaur kind of mopped the floor with him. It's been coming up for 2 years now since he won his last title. It just feels like he's just not the same player at all, and I don't know if it was that moment. He talks about the Australian Open that just kind of shattered him. He just made me never look like quite the same player. I feel for the guy. I don't know how you feel, Vansh.
No, to me, like since that Wimbledon win over Sinner in the quarterfinals, to me he hasn't felt right since then. Like he just hasn't been the same guy. Obviously, the serve has been declining all of last season, and that was the biggest weapon for him. Even on clay, he could win so many matches just by getting a few more free points, and because every time they're in neutral baseline rallies, he just doesn't have enough off the ground anymore. And guys are more consistent than him. That used to be his calling card: just serve big and don't miss off the ground. And he now I just feel like he's lost his identity a little bit, and he's like over pressing, overplaying, and he's getting involved in these scraps. And you can feel it that his mind is a mess as well in some of these matches. He doesn't have that same level of belief and focus, and it's just like it spills over. Like the guy, you look at the list of players that he's lost to this year, like many of them are outside the top 50. So it's like, I mean the whole February swing was not great. I suppose Indian Wells, he saved himself a little bit. That match against Peace, he ends up winning, but that's probably the best win he's had by far this whole year. That quarterfinal against Peace, like, so it's kind of tough to see where he goes next. But at this point, I'd be surprised if he makes a 4th round or quarterfinal in RG.
100%. I'd even say probably odds on not to. It's my feeling. I feel like 4 matches in a row pretty tough, especially on obviously his lesser preferred surface. Obviously he's performed well there before, so who knows? And actually, we're obviously mentioning results there that do imply he's still got a pretty decent level somewhere in there, even if it's a little bit shaky. He if he can kind of get everything in check, he's got a pretty good chance. But I just think he's far off. He's far off at the moment. It's a shame. Medvedev behind us. That's kind of the last player I wanted to mention, Vansh. If there's anybody else you can think of before we move on.
Yeah, I mean, I think really quickly, just Casper Ruud, I think, is also in need of some big results. He's defending a 500 now in Barcelona. Obviously, he made the final here as well. I think he's like 28th in the race. So it hasn't been great for him either since Roland Garros last year when he had the stomach bug after the first set against Zverev. And since then, really, I mean, he made the semifinals of the ATP finals, but that's really about it. And there hasn't been, he hasn't been playing with the same level of authoritativeness on the forehand, like going after it, being more aggressive. In the match against Popperin, he had match points, and he kind of took his gas off the, he kind of took his foot off the gas, and just started, was having to defend most of the time, and that's not really the Casper that's going deep in those tournaments last year. So there's something going on with his confidence, and I feel like he has a lot of points coming up to defend, but at the same time, not as much in Madrid and Rome. So maybe in the next 3 tournaments, and I'm still not counting him out at all for Roland Garros, because the last 3 years in a row he's made a semi, and he seems to find his best there usually.
Yeah.
So maybe in the next 3 tournaments, at least one semifinal, you would hope for him. Yeah,
I mean, if we're talking, we've just talked about 3 players: Zverev, Medvedev, and de Minaur. I think players who kind of have an outside chance and maybe need to find a bit of Tsitsipas. Was the other one that the obviously the original new gen. I think I fancy Ruud's chances over those 3, which maybe says a lot, given none of their forms are amazing right now. Even Zverev, obviously having just made a slam final, I still think I fancy Ruud's chances more. just because
I still feel like he'll get it back in time for at least one tournament now. It's because I don't think he's like that far off, but it's just a confidence thing. Like this time last year he would win a match like that. But
I totally agree. It depends how the next few tournaments go and kind of go from there. Because obviously things could just get a lot worse, but if he has a few deep runs, then he'll trust himself again. So I don't think he's a million miles away. I think with Ruud behind us, maybe we could talk a little bit about the couple of tournaments that are coming up this week. Obviously, you mentioned Barcelona, Munich. We've mentioned Zverev playing in Munich, Ruud playing in Barcelona, having to defend the title. Anything else that comes to mind with those two tournaments on the roster?
Yeah, Alcaraz is going to be the top seed in Barcelona. Obviously, a tournament he's won twice. It'll be the first time he'll try to do the Monte Carlo, Barcelona, like playing both of them, one after the other after winning Monte Carlo. But he plays Ethan Quinn in the first round. That's going to be interesting. Just like I watched Ethan Quinn a ton in the San Diego Challenger, and he's got a couple of good wins in the qualifying here. But bigger picture, yeah, you're looking at this. You're probably thinking Alcaraz should get to the quarters, and then I think his potential opponent would be De Minaur, and then you could get another rematch with Feast as well in the semis. And then the final, we'll see who comes through between like Runa and Ruud and pairs like that. So so overall, it's not like a massively huge deal. I think if Alcaraz doesn't win this tournament, just because he won Monte Carlo already, but at the same time, it's a good opportunity for him to just keep piling more points, get that lead over before Sinner comes back, and just keep maintaining that number 2 spot and just keep it going, I guess.
Yeah, I think Alcaraz in Barcelona, absolutely a match made in heaven, to be fair. So even if Ethan Quinn comes out firing, obviously he's had a lot of good form recently, but it's Alcaraz in Barcelona. I think it'll be could even be two quite close sets, but I just think Alcaraz every time here. He'll fancy it. I think he's up for it. I think Monte Carlo will just get him going. He'll be really, really keen to do the double here. I think it'll be quite good to watch. I'm quite excited for that one. So I'll tune into it. But I do fancy Alcaraz's chances in general at this tournament. Hopefully Ruud can at least make a deep run. That's kind of the two players that I'm watching, the first and second seeds. And there's loads of other good matches from the offset in that tournament. It'll be a good one. And then we've got Munich as well. Of course, as you mentioned, Zverev as the top seed there. He's against Alexander Muller.
I haven't looked at the Munich draw yet, but I know that it's not as strong as Barcelona for sure.
So there's still plenty of good players there. We've got men's six seeds. I'm quite excited to see how he does after.
Oh, I think he's actually in Zverev's quarter. So if we got a men's six Zverev in the quarterfinal,
I imagine
looks tasty.
Can't even picture having seen Menchik on clay recently, but I imagine that's probably not his favourite surface. Just the size of the ball he hits. How have you seen Menchik on clay?
I think last year he was injured up until Madrid, so he was wearing an arm sleeve, and then he took out Dimitrov in Madrid. So I remember that. But it's going to be interesting to see him because I haven't seen him properly tested yet on it.
Yeah.
You got guys like Lerner TN and Greek Sport maybe could go and do something here. Yeah, I think there's a lot of possibilities, but it kind of also depends on how well Zverev plays, I feel like. Because if Zverev finds his form in Munich with a little bit of altitude under him, I think he might rediscover it. But
that's kind of what I was thinking as well. And obviously we talked about Zverev's maybe lack of confidence in the number one, kind of being in the back of his head. Really, these should be 2 rounds where Serve does most of the damage. He gets through. If he's really lacking in confidence and he gets stung here, it's going to carry on to other tournaments, I think. So I think this is quite an important tournament for him. I would
and now it's mathematically impossible for him to be number 1. And with him already being overtaken, like Alcaraz overtaking the number 2, he shouldn't have any pressure, compared to what he had going into Monte Carlo. So I don't know, maybe that'll help him play better tennis. Maybe his actual tennis isn't as strong. Could be a combination of both.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be surprised if he turned it around a little bit this week.
Yeah,
for sure.
It does. It feels like when you've got the serve to kind of, for Zverev, when you've got the serve just taking you along, he can rely on that kind of neutral game, and maybe he can take a few more chances as well, just every so often.
Just
Do you
realized
have any-
Jan-Lennard Struff enjoys these conditions, and he beat Taylor Fritz here last year when it was a 250.
I'd love to see a deep Struffy run. Big fan of Struff. His form's been a bit spotty though, and actually Cerundolo.
Yeah. I would back Cerundolo there, but
Yeah. But it'd be good to see.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Love that match. Remember talking. John had that down as his potential match of the year. I remember, and I was close to backing him up. Actually, I loved it. It was really, really good.
Yeah.
So yeah, fingers crossed he can make a deep run. I'd love to see that. And I'm pretty sure Struff. Did he get to the final?
I think he won it last year, right? He
won it last year. That was it. His first title.
That was his first career title. Yeah, it was a big story last year.
That was it. Yeah. So yeah, fingers crossed he can defend the title. Then we'll see what happens. Right. I don't know if there's much more to talk about, Vance. If there's anything else, you can let me know now or forever hold your peace.
Not really. I'm looking forward to some of these matches. Actually, I realized, this week with the 500s, when you have two ATP 500s in the same week, it's some of my favorite 10 weeks of the year. Actually,
producers pointing at Cilic as well, actually, who has lost the opportunity to make the main draw at the French Open. That's probably the story of the week, right?
yeah. I mean, Cilic would have been top 100 if he wins that match, and I think going into, I was checking the scores, he was up a break in the final set. So
he was.
Yeah, I was kind of pulling for him because this just the comeback story of already. Yeah.
Maybe it was up a break. He was certainly up 3-2.
I think so. Yeah, something like that.
It was close anyway, but yeah, it means that he doesn't make the French Open main draw. And of course, we know that Cilic is probably the dark horse at the French Open. You know, he's the guy that causes the most upsets generally. After that crazy semi-final run, nobody can count him out. Right, Vance?
Exactly. Yeah. Maybe he was. Yeah.
And I think also
would have been the favorite of RG if he beat Majrak.
I think I also saw Ghosty say that Gasquet might win the French Open.
I guess it was on serve. Yeah, it was on serve 3-2. Okay.
Do we fancy Gasquet to win the French Open? I don't know.
Against Cilic in the final, yeah, maybe. You know.
I'm gonna say it could be Cilic in the final. Epic 5-setter, definitely.
Yeah.
Right. If you just tuned in, we were talking like normal tennis a second ago. That was just a little tangent before we finished. For just my disclaimer, I fancy Alcaraz at the moment for the French Open. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. But
I think most of the bookies, I'd be surprised if they had anybody else's.
So last year as well. Yeah. Surely.
I think so.
Right, on that note, Vance, thank you very much. That was very good fun. Hopefully we get to do the same thing very soon. Make sure it's not quite as long next time. Good to see you. And for everybody else at home, we'll see everybody soon. Thanks very much.
Yep, thank you.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell so you don't miss out on all things tennis.